Welcome, folks. Really what I look at is we're kind of looking at a sequencing of the presentations. I really appreciate the initial presentation looking at overall community violence, especially as it relates to the gang influence. We start to look at Vivian's comments regarding just liability concerns. I want to continue to narrow down a little bit about myself and about my partnership. My partner, Dr. Ann Phelps, and I have been contracted by the city and as a result of a shooting that occurred in 2005. Our area of expertise is really workplace violence, and it started back in 1993 when we were working with Los Angeles Water and Power, and they had a fellow murdered on the job down at Haynes Generating Station. And we were asked to look at this thing called workplace violence. How is it somebody comes to work, doesn't go home, end a shift? And unfortunately, since that event, we've worked a number of shootings. I mentioned in 2005 we had another shooting here in the city of L.A. where two fellas, Renee Flores and Rick Garris, were shot and killed by a young man named Thomas Sampson. I've responded to shootings 1993 in May. I've down at Dana Point Post Office working on that particular shooting, responding to that. We had a shooting at downtown L.A. Some of you may have heard about it in July of 95 where 4 supervisors were shot and killed. I worked a shooting at Los Angeles International Airport. Department of Agriculture had 3 employees shot and killed. And I've worked a number of cases. And I'm not here to talk about workplace violence in the broad scheme. I appreciate Vivian's comments and looking at the fact that what we really want to do is ensure that we go home every day and a shift. Part of what my partner and I have been doing with the city is looking at our policies, our procedures. I really believe what we've been doing since 2005 is implementing best practices. I think what we were afforded an opportunity to do is to come back and completely revamp and relook at what were we doing in the city, how were we doing our business. Vivian is an essential part of that program. OPS, Office of Public Safety is a part of that. LAPD is a part. City personnel. We've got a bunch of constituents, and what we're trying to do is make sure we go home every day in a shift, and we don't have any more headlines like this. This is not how we do business. One of the things, though, that I think is what I'm going to talk about today is not the homicide, but as we start to look at workplace violence, and as I mentioned, Vivian mentioned it earlier, we look at a very broad kind of a strategy to prevent violence, and this just flat makes sense. We jump all over the OSHA bandwagon. OSHA says that you must provide a workplace free from identifiable health and safety hazards. Who must provide the safe work environment, according to Congress? The employer. Typically is represented by who? The city. Management. Supervision. We know that we have to have violence-free neighborhood council meetings, neighborhood council activities, and often that is the responsibility is going to fall on the council members and on the community members. And so what we're going to do is look at how it is that we can provide that safe, healthy work environment. Now, the other end of the extreme is where we ignore potential problems or actual problems. When we fail to take appropriate actions, then people like myself or Dr. Phelps or others come in afterwards. And we've responded to a bunch of shootings, and it just makes sense. We're better served at preventing it than coming in afterwards and applying services then. I don't want to do that. Over the years, I can't tell you, maybe 25 or 30 homes I've gone in, had to tell women their husbands are dead. 75 or 80 kids have to tell them that their father's not coming home again. That's not what we want to do. Here's our challenge. How do we identify? How do we see it? How do we respond? And the challenge is a lot of times things rise to the threshold of getting your attention, and we have to decide, what do we do? Vivian Swanigan earlier mentioned one of the tools we have is a restraining order. You all heard earlier, and several of you talked about the police opportunities to intervene, and we can get an arrest perhaps. We can look at civil actions, a lawsuit. And part of our solution and part of our goal, though, is to say, how do we push it to the earliest level? How do we see it? How do we predict? And maybe more importantly, how do we prevent these things from ever occurring? Because when we get to the point of getting a lawsuit, by the time we get to an arrest, by the time we get to a restraining order, it's already evolved into something very dramatic. And frankly, it starts to create a whole life of its own. And we'd rather not do that if we can. How do we see it early? How do we intervene meaningfully? So from that, what we really want to do is look at strategy you have. I was going to mention, I was actually got a telephone call from a superintendent at a yard actually only 2 blocks away from here at the Oxnard yard, Oxnard and Van Nuys Boulevard. And it must have been 15 years ago. I got a call around 7 in the morning one day, and the superintendent said, "Pat, we've got a problem out here. We've got a man walking around the yard with a shotgun looking for his supervisor." I said, "You got the wrong phone number. Who should he be calling?" Yeah, I'm from Alabama. We call them police. I said, "You need to call the police, but I don't know about the po-po stuff, but I know police. I said, you better call the police and get them out here. Now call me back in a half hour because I'd like to know what happened. But you know as well as I do, no one starts off out of the blue with no other history, with no other relationship, with nothing else. No one starts off bringing a shotgun and walking around. If the best we can do is call 911, we'll call them. But how long are we going to hide? How long are we going to be afraid to come to work? How long are we going to be afraid to do our business? How long do we look over our shoulders? Those are hard fixes. What we'd rather do is push the threshold, see it earlier. I'm not saying it's easy earlier, but it's easier earlier. And that's really what we're going to focus on. How do we really identify and intervene? So one of the things we've done with the city is try to look at a typology, if you will, a risk level. And the reason we do that is that each level really has a different set of interventions. We're going to react differently at a quote-unquote high level, risk of imminent danger, than a low level. And one of the challenges we have is that sometimes when we look at these things, low level implies maybe that it's not really a big deal. It's a big deal. They're very significant. It's not imminently lethal, though. And that really is an important distinction. And we look at low-level behavior. I bet you all experience these things, I don't want to say regularly, but have all experienced some of these in your neighborhood council meetings. Challenging, bullying, intimidating statements. We get some folks that will argue with a door. I don't know what it is. They'll argue. You say good morning, they get mad at you. You don't say good morning, it's worse. It's that hostile, belligerent, it's just how they are. We look at language. I really appreciate Vivian saying some things may not be defamatory, it may not be harassment, but some things we don't need to say. I listen to things like language. And it's not just did somebody curse. But what's the more important question, really? Intent. Why? Now, I'll mess with you then since you brought it up. What's your first name, sir? Oh, Kenny. I heard Vivian mention Kenny. I don't know. We all notice these things, and we're trained detectives. But as Kenny says, if I come in and I get a report, Kenny's cussing up a storm. All right, I'm interested. But the second question is really important. Why? If it turns out when he walked in this morning, he sat down at a chair, he bumped his knee, and it's his trick knee, and it hurt real bad, and he says, gosh darn it, son of a gun, that is still fundamentally different than if he walks in the room going, gosh darn you, son of a gun. And on paper, they look pretty close, but they're not. And a hard challenge we have, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes ago, is asking, why did this person do what they did? And some folks are going to say, I don't know. I don't know why anybody does anything. And I don't know that's ever really true. I think we have to go back and ask, what was the behavior? And what does it mean about their intent? When is a threat a threat? I love that one. That's really what we find in moderate level. These are threats. And not all threats are I'm going to kill yous. We get a lot of vague threats. We get a lot of things like, I hope your insurance is paid up. Boy, it'd be terrible if something bad happened to you. Your kid's going to be taken care of? We get these kind of things like, hey, no one talks to me that way. Someone did that to me in my last job, and he's still not walking right. And now we're going, dang. And when's a threat a threat? And we listen to the language, the position, the how it's transmitted, emails. There's a wonderful world we have in there, and way off subject, but I think stalking has gone through the roof because of electronic opportunities. And I'm going to tell you right now, we spend a lot of time on stalking cases, and I think because of those issues. And so there's a lot of ways, creative ways to communicate, but it's always that why. Why would they do that? I was doing a training one day for the city of LA, and this is not very long ago. And at break, I hear people, and one of the participants went to the window and said, if you don't get moving, if you don't get out of there right now, I'm going to come over there and kill you. Is that a threat? Yeah. What's the more important question? And who are they talking to? What was the intent? What's the context? All that other stuff. And who are they talking to? Their 17-year-old son who's sleeping in was supposed to get up and go to school that day. Now do we have a Penal Code Section 422 terrorist threat? Criminal threat. Excuse me, it's not terrorist threat, criminal threat. Do we have a criminal threat? I'm sorry? It depends on the kid. And I love that. And Vivian said it jokingly, but she wasn't kidding when with attorneys, you give them a question, they give you, well, it depends. Everything, though. What was the context? I heard something earlier about, I brought you in, I'll take you out. You're my child. But do I think you're imminently dangerous? Maybe. But it depends, right? And that's one of the challenges we have, because if you're the person who feels threatened, If you're the person who feels you're getting the stink eye from somebody, if you're the person who feels intimidated, and you go to your council president, or you contact your Dunn rep, or you contact Vivian Swanigan, or you contact myself or my partner, and we say, well, let me look into it and see what they will think, and you're going to say, I don't want you to do that. What do you want me to do? Fix it. Protect you. Take care of it. And the hardest thing we have to do is slow down, catch our breath, and figure out what we have. And Vivian and I and my partner and the detective in charge of threat management from LAPD, we talk regularly, and Hugo, her partner, Vivian's partner, about should we or shouldn't we get a TRO? Should we get a restraining order? Temporary restraining order and make it a permanent restraining order. Do restraining orders protect you? Well, I got a no, which is not equivocal. I got a not really, which is kind of equivocal. I got a no yeses in the group? Not physically? Well, the old rule out there is a piece of paper can't stop a bullet, and I accept that. So do we like restraining orders?
Yes.
Why? It may be a deterrent, because some folks, if you say stop, may not, but if they get a police officer knocking on the door serving them, they may. It allows police officers to open up and use tools they might not otherwise have available. We can start to establish that pattern of behavior that Vivian mentioned earlier. So do we want a restraining order? It depends. It depends. We got to look at it. Does it make us safer or not? I had a case not too long ago where we had two police officers were going through a rather ugly divorce, and I don't know if any divorces are pretty, but it was not real pleasant for either of them. And many months after the separation, the female said she wanted to get a restraining order against her husband. I asked her, or actually her lieutenant called and said, what do you think? And I said, why is she getting it? And she's alleging that 7 months earlier he grabbed her in the kitchen and yelled at her and detained her inappropriately. I said, okay, clearly that's inappropriate behavior. But if you are truly afraid of this fella, what will a restraining order do? Take away his guns. And now you're taking away his job. And now you're taking away his identity. And now you're taking away his ability to provide for himself and his family. Are you making yourself safer or not? And I don't know the answer, but we better ask the questions. And now comes a challenge for you. You will be engaged. When Vivian asked, has anybody ever had a meeting where someone's been hostile or aggressive? If you didn't raise your hand, I saw you nod your head, so it's good enough. We've all had that experience. All right, what avenues do we want to pursue? And one of the great opportunities I think that we have in the city now, I believe, since 2005, when we went back and really started to redo how we do business in the world of threat assessment and violence prevention, is we get a group of folks to sit down with you, we'll scratch our heads with you, and we'll say, what do we have? And what really is our best intervention? And a lot of it has to do with what the behavior is, and then more importantly, what does it mean? What's the context? And those are hard, because if you're the one who's scared, you're the one who's fearful, you're the one who really is tired of this, folks. I get it. I understand it. Please understand what we're trying to do is ultimately make you safer in the long run. Sir? The question is, we keep speaking of board members. What about the stakeholders? I think all of us have a vested interest. I'm speaking to y'all as board members, so I'm kind of going to do that here right now. But y'all are also stakeholders. You're also community members. You're also, receivers of services, not just providers. So I want to hopefully address all those broad issues. I'm going to kind of just to your role as a board member, but I hope that what we're talking about applies throughout. I really hope so. We get into things like, if we move up the spectrum, we get into things like assaults. When is an assault, or state of California battery, when is it an assault? Well, I don't know that either. So you just touched them on the shoulder. Assault. In my business, we have, and I see a lot of, I see a lot of what I call belly bumps. Now, belly bumps are many different things. It could be two people my shape trying to get to the same door. I'm sorry, we're going to bump into each other, folks, because, we take up a lot of extra space. And if we don't much like each other, might one of us say, I've been assaulted? I'm a victim of battery? And the answer is, well, yeah. And might even have obviously, if you call in the police department, they will act as an agent of the citizen and make an arrest, and for a misdemeanor not committed in their presence. So we get the citizen's arrest kind of scenario. And what happens then is I'll leave Kenny alone for a minute. What's your name, sir? I want to get Neil. He bumped into me, so I'm going to have him arrested, and Neil's going to get me arrested, and the police officer is going to say, please don't do this to me. But we have belly bump. We have another situation I worked on not too long ago here in the city of L.A. There is a fairly new employee. He's still on probation. He's an apprentice electrician. And they're up on a roof doing some work, and one of the journeyman-level employees bumped him. And he's already on his hands and knees doing some work, and he falls over into the asphalt and tar on the roof. And everybody in the crew busts up laughing. They think it's funny. Just hazing a guy. Just come, welcome to the crew. Is that an assault? Is that a battery? Is that an arrestable offense? Theoretically, yes, it was intentional. Now we got to say, well, what's up? Is it service? And then we got the belly bump where I come up to Neil and I'm in his face and I'm intimidating him and I'm screaming and yelling, calling him bad names. I'm spitting all over his forehead and bumping him as I do it. Is that an assault? Probably. Now see, we're getting easier. By the way, which one of those is probably going to cost us more in the long run? The inadvertent in the beginning, the last one, and neither of you are right, so what are we left with? You know what costs us the more in the long run? Is the fellow who knocks the guy over. And what's everybody else do? Laugh at him. And now, a year later, he says, I want the police here. I have been assaulted. And it's not an assault in my world. It doesn't warrant arrest. But what it has done is created a relationship gap that is not easily fixed. Because when we add in that humiliation, when we add in that taunting, those don't fix well. And that's part of what we have to go back and look at. How do we address that? Where are we in the spectrum? Go ahead, sir.
It affects the way that his peers are going to see him from that point into.
It affects how his peers see him. That's right. That's right. How he sees himself. It is huge. And so part of what we do is we go back and say, well, what interventions do we have? And how do we prevent these? And what are y'all supposed to do? And we're going to start talking about that. But the answers are going to become pretty easy because you know them already. And I'll give you the answer already. What is the single most effective tool that we all have to reduce the potential for violence in our arena? Communication? Silence? Respect? I'm going to go with respect. Treat people with respect. Here's a just kind of a sideline to a very ugly chapter in City of Los Angeles history. In July of 1995, a fellow by the name of Willie Woods shot and killed 4 supervisors. He walked through the facility and he shot each of these 4 people. He puts the pistol in his pocket and he's walking out of the facility. He's killed every supervisor that he could. In from the loading dock comes another supervisor who had been out there on a cigarette break. Willie takes the pistol out of his pocket, puts it in the middle of the man's head, and says something to the extent of, I just killed 4 other supervisors, and I should kill you. But you know, you've been nice to me. You treated me okay. And he put the gun in his pocket, and he walked on by. I get it. I don't have to be the brightest bulb in the chandelier. I get it. And I have a friend with the Sheriff's Department, and he was talking about some other shootings he's worked, and he wants to write a chapter in the book, so I'm going to try to beat him to it. And the title of the chapter is, But You Were Nice to Me. But you treated me decently. And so we're going to keep coming back to that as an essential component to, I think, community safety. I think is an essential component to council safety. I think is an essential component to workplace safety. It won't solve everything. You know that as well as I do. There's some folks out there that are just flat nuts. That's a clinical term. And there's some folks out there that have dangers and issues that we can't fix. But for the most part, we can do a lot. Now, where is it that we bring in the police? Where is it that we bring in the city attorney? Where is it that we look at banning or denying somebody access? And I'll tell you the truth, I really don't know. But here are the behaviors we start to pay attention to, and we report them, we share them. One of the things we spend a great deal of time with City of LA employees on is, if you see it, say it. Please tell us. Employees know more than supervisors do. Supervisors know more than managers. All of them know more than I do, and often I'm the one that's called in to ask and determine whether or not there's a dangerous situation. I want to go talk to somebody who knows what's been going on. What have you seen? And we know folks know things. And so we want you as community board members, share information. Please understand the process of evaluating it. And unfortunately, if it comes into somebody's office and they say, well, you know, it's really low risk, we're going to do these things, and you're going to say, see, you didn't protect me. And that's frustrating. We appreciate that. But we need to figure out, where are we? What do we really have? And we notice behavior, because y'all learned when you were young, same thing I learned when I was a kid. Action talks. We pay attention. Now, the good news is the vast majority, even people who threaten to kill you, have no intent to carry it out. Thank God. If every, if 10% of the people who threatened to kill somebody ever did, I didn't want to go down that road. It's overwhelming because we know probably somewhere in the neighborhood of millions of threats occur annually in American business. Forget about the community. My kids got soccer games. I mean, parents and soccer should not be allowed to mix. Although I was been on the texting all morning. My son's team tied, and I'm not sure I should be happy or not. I still wish they'd won. In any case, it's sports. We see all kinds of stuff in our communities. So when is it important? When it rises these thresholds. What are we going to do? I don't know. It depends. Now, what I will tell you right now is I'd rather handle it at the lowest level possible. Kenny, see, I can remember Nick's name now, but Kenny and I got some beef. We may have avenues to push it up through the system, but I think they're more likely to be resolved here. If I have to start bringing third parties, then I'm posturing for the third party, and he's posturing for his constituents, and I don't know that we're easily resolved. So where we can solve it locally, we're better served. And some things, folks, you and I can't fix. We better bring somebody else in. I get it, and that's okay. So part of what we want to do then is realize, where are we on this continuum? Where are people? And we have this idea to action continuum. There's a lot of writing on it. I was at a presentation earlier this summer with one of the psychologists with Navy Criminal Investigative Services. There really is an NCIS. They're not like what you see on TV, but still. And they use this. We use this. There's a number of folks who use this notion that people get on this behavioral continuum. And what usually the research and the literature says is that in threat assessment is they get this idea of intent to commit an act of violence. We say more fundamentally, much earlier than that, they get this idea that something's wrong. They have this sense of dissatisfaction. They have this sense of distress. They have this sense of humiliation, maybe. They have this sense that something needs to be addressed. The idea to actually commit an act comes much, much later because sometimes this sense of being treated unfairly or wrong may persist for years and decades. Now, even before that, we may have what Vivian was mentioning, and that is the seriously annoying. And now we have, because of whether it's personality or lack of communication skills or lack of education or too much education. I mean, some folks have a lot of degrees and they still aren't very educated. That we look at the broad spectrum, that sometimes folks are just difficult. And y'all remember years ago, we'd pass by some folks and we'd go, look at that fella. Yeah, he's a strange one. And we just walk on by. Nowadays, we're scared. It's different out there. We'll walk by the same person doing the same behavior and go, ooh, stay away from him, he's dangerous. I'm not saying they're not dangerous. I'm saying let's find out. And if they're not, let's not treat them like they are. And we can figure it out if you get the right folks at the table asking the right questions. All of it's still predicated on your observing, you're engaging, you're participating in the process. So we ask ourselves, where are they? And the best part of my business is that to go from idea of I'm going to cause somebody harm to actually coming in and doing it, even especially something as grotesque as homicide, that is a huge leap. And thank God very, very few people do it. Here's a trivia question. Not trivial, but trivia maybe. Workplace violence. We hear about it all the time. That's what I do for a living. How many people do you imagine each year are murdered by a coworker nationally? Look at all 50 states. We'll throw Puerto Rico in as well, and I guess Virgin Islands are another area, and throw Guam in. What the heck, let's get them all. Yeah, get all of them. So how many people do you imagine are murdered on the job by a coworker each year nationally? I heard 5,000. I heard 50 to 100, and then I heard 300, and the right answer is one of those. It's close to 300. Give or take a little bit, maybe 3 to 5. It depends. Some years more, some less, of course. Most folks who are killed in the workplace, who are they killed by? No, criminals. Criminals. It's the 7-Eleven clerk. It's the private security officer. Most of them are killed by criminals. But we don't really look at that as workplace violence, do we? But if we look at internal coworker, it's still, and only is really an offensive word here, and I apologize, but only about 300 through 400. Depends. Well, that's pretty good. 50 states. It feels a whole lot different. I read the paper. I'm thinking it's every other day here in L.A., right? But, sir. That's a great question, too, because now we get into Centers for Disease Control tracks homicides. So that's an easy capture. Centers for Disease Control nor OSHA Now, NIOSH and those folks, National Institute on Safety and Health, track occupational accidents. And they do look at assaults. How many go up to just before they get dead kind of assault to the belly bump? The truth is we truly don't know. We can guess, but there is no clear reporting. We suspect a couple million. We suspect a couple million. But now we get everything from shooting somebody and they survive to belly bumping in the doorway. And that really is hard to pin down. So we try to figure out where are people on this continuum. The goal of identifying the distressed person, for lack of a better expression, is to figure out where are they and how do we channel them into another avenue of expression. If we allow a person to continue on this continuum, then the logical outcome is violence. But we can intervene, and intervention means everything from the more formal structures of restraining orders, arrest, and some of those, to a more informal discussion, to providing somebody, I mean, we've got all kinds of opportunities within our communities for whether it's storefront counseling, we have all kinds of churches and doing all kinds of things in our communities. How do we give them some avenues to move off of this continuum and more effectively, healthily address their distress? That's what our goal is. To see it, to figure out what it is, and then to come up with an intervention that actually matches that. Some folks need to go to jail. Some folks need something else. And I'd rather fix it earlier than later.
How do you know when it's a good, how do you know that it needs fixing? How do you know when it's a good time to intervene?
Because it kind of gets back to harassment. And Vivian didn't say these words, but a lot of the harassment literature says harassment is that behavior which creates a sense of discomfort. It is an unwanted pattern of behavior that is distressing to the person. If that's not broad enough, I don't know where to go. But I'm going to steal that and jump onto your question. The question was, how do we know it's a behavior that needs intervening? It's causing distress. Now, it may be, I'm filing a report on Kenny here. I'm trying to get him looked at by the city attorney. I want redress because the fellow's sitting here eyeballing me, and I'm all wigged out. And it turns out he doesn't have his glasses on. He's not eyeballing me. He can't even see this far. And the problem is not Kenny, it's me. The issue we do is we look at not just the behavior, but the context. And I'm very quick to start looking at the totality. And the good news is folks don't abuse this process very much. The bad news is some folks are going to use it to their own end, where the truth is I just don't flat like the guy, and I'm going to say he's trying to harass me and intimidate me and he's causing violence, and it may not be the case. So we need to look at the whole picture. But back to the essential element of your question, how do we know he needs fixing? It's causing distress. That's a big umbrella, but that's how we're going to at least start off with. Yes. Or either. Something's going on. It may be. And part of what we're going to see that Dr. Phelps and I spend most of our time doing is we try to fix problems. We come and say, something's going on. It may not be an imminent danger, but how do we make sure it doesn't continue on this path? It may be all kinds of things, and we need to look at this. Yes, right, the root, yes. So one of the easy questions, and it's not an easy question, but an essential question maybe. Why do folks do what they do? Why do people come in and come into your meetings? Why do folks join your boards? Well, here's an easy one. Why are you here today, sir?
I'm thinking of running for the assembly.
All right, so you're trying to run state assembly?
Yeah.
All right, well, good luck. I heard, so he's got some sort of long-term goal. This may help him out, getting the knowledge or getting the exposure. You said to help people is why you're doing it. Why are you here today, ma'am?
I just got appointed to Midtown North Hollywood Council.
All right.
I want to learn about.
Just got put on the council. You want to learn so you can do your job more effectively. Why are you here today, sir?
My assets.
Cover your assets. I'm one of the financial people. I appreciate Vivian mentioned that. Very good. All right, sir, how about you? Why are you here today?
Get information.
Get information. Why are y'all on community council? Neighborhood councils? To make a difference. To move on to bigger and better things. To make a better world for your community. To help your kids.
I'd like to better deal with this. I'd like to be someone who can help the council deal with those situations by coming to this.
All right, to help council deal with situations from your community. We've got a lot of different reasons why folks do things. Most of the reason people are doing things that are here today, this is Saturday. We could be at home watching football. I could have gone to my son's soccer game. Everybody in this room left something else behind to do this. So my belief is y'all are here because you want to make a difference. You're here because this whole process is important to you. You care that improving your neighborhood is worth your while, is something for your kids. So now when I start looking at why do folks come into your meetings, I'm assuming, and I'm not always correct, but I'm assuming that most of the folks that come in want to make a difference. They want something better. Now, some of them are loud, they're difficult, they may not get along with very healthy people like me or you, but I'm assuming that there's a reason they're there. Why do people get angry? Why do people have conflicts? Because they're not getting what they need. They're not getting their basic needs met. And so is that perceived injustice maybe? Now, that's the second issue. One is they're not getting the need met, and this perceived injustice is why they're not. And that's a big deal. We're not getting it met because we only have a certain amount of assets and we can't allocate some there is different from, well, you're not going to get the funding because we don't think you're worth a shit. I apologize. We can edit that out, right? I'll blame the military. I'll blame somebody. I got issues. No, I can't do that one. But some level, folks feel y'all don't care. And I don't know that's really the truth. Y'all care. You wouldn't be here today. They care. They wouldn't come in there. The meetings aren't that fun. So we got to figure out what is it they really want and how is it we can get them what they want. And I've done a lot of training back in the late 80s and late 90s. My partner and I did a lot of work at the Civil Rights Enforcement Commission for the USDA out of Washington. And we did a lot of the harassment training. We did a lot of discrimination and diversity training. And one of the things that always struck me with diversity training is some of these instructors will bring folks in and say, okay, all the people born in the United States over there, and all the folks born in Mexico over here, and all the folks born in Asia over here, and we separate out and say, let's look at how different we are. And that's all interesting. But I think we're more served at saying, okay, we'll accept that. I can look around the room and see differences. I can look at some age, race, gender differences. That's real easy. What do we have in common? What do we have that ties us together? Well, in this room alone, we got a bunch of folks that want to make this a better community. And I can't help but think you want to run for assembly because you want to make it a better community. So I think that fits in with the other ones, too. It ain't for the money. No, that's not. So if we look around the room, what does everybody in this room have in common? You want to make this a better community. You want to do something for your kids, for the generations not even here, for kids that you don't even know. You want to make a difference. You want to be effective at what you do. And by the way, if we get even more basic, I think everyone in this room wants to be treated with respect. I think you want to do work that's meaningful. I think you want to treat people with respect. You wouldn't be in the business. So what we find is really valuable is instead of focusing on how different we all are, let's look at how similar we all are. My belief is that if we have a common ground between us, the differences become meaningless. If we have no common ground, the differences will keep us apart forever. So when we talk about appreciating diversity, let's figure out what we have in common first. And so we look at things like respect, appreciation, recognition. Now, I'm not talking about the building with your name on it. Oh, that's a cool thing. But recognition is often someone come and say, thanks, I really appreciated your efforts. You made a difference. It's one of the more, I think, is sad things, because I got a lot of retirement dinners, and you know, as we're getting older. By the way, August is your birth month. What day? Yes. Didn't you say last month was your birthday? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I took a second. I'm very literal. So my birthday's last month, too, so. June, okay. So I go to retirement dinners, and as I get older, I go to a lot more. And it's really sad that at some of these retirement dinners, folks say, you know what, I'd like to say something about this fella here. When I first started back in 1973, he was the first person that came up and talked to me. And you know, I don't know if I ever told you, but that really made me feel welcome. And I'm sitting there in the back room thinking, why didn't you tell him that 30 years ago? Folks, show appreciation today. Thank him for it now. Number one, he'll feel good. Number two, he's more likely to do it again. It's that reward kind of behavior. But it's sad. I don't want to give recognition or get it when I'm done. Just give it to folks along the way. So we find opportunities to appreciate. We find opportunities to recognize. And sometimes that's not easy, because you know what? Kenny and I might not like each other. But it doesn't mean he's not contributing meaningfully. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have good intentions. And that's part of what we have to start working for. We always ask, why do folks do what they do? And whether you believe it or not, I know you asked that question anyways, it's a fundamental psychological principle. It's called attribution. Events happen, they mean nothing. You attach meaning, and everything else follows from that. I walk in and I say, good morning to Kenny, and he walks right on by, he don't say nothing. And I'm thinking, that's stuck up, no good nuts. And if that's the meaning I attach to that, how am I going to feel towards Kenny? Resentful, not good. I'm going to talk bad about him behind his back. I'm going to slow down all his projects. I'm going to undermine everything he does. I'm going home early with a headache. Probably take it on the kids. But what may have happened is he might not have heard me. Now will I feel differently? Yeah, so what happens is I didn't ask him, did you hear me? I just started going off my attribution. I started going off my assumption. Vivian Swanigan started off earlier today to say, we have assumptions. They may or may not be accurate. All behavior follows from those. So you react to people based on your assumption of what their intent is. Check it out. Assume when you start off with any of the constituents you have, and you start off with any folks in this room, that folks in this room are well-intended. Start off with the assumption that everybody you deal with outside of this room wants to be treated with respect, wants to be appreciated for their efforts, wants their community to be better at some fundamental level. We have to coexist, but I think it's that intent. Now, how we do it, some folks are much more effective than others, and we can get to that. But we start off with those intents. Then we start to figure out, when I get angry, how do I manage it? How do I deal with it? Because, folks, we get angry. We have unmet expectations. We have different needs. It's like I tell my oldest son, who's 19 now, and he's off at college, over here at Northridge. He's at CSUN. I said, son, I don't mind you getting mad. I'd be mad at me, too, if I was you. But don't you yell at your little brother and sister. Don't take it out on me. Anger is not an issue. We get angry. It can be healthy at some level, but it's what we do with it that counts. And I'm going to do in about 5 minutes what really could be a 6-week program. Anger management. I'm not a very good businessman. I don't understand. Go to Barnes & Noble. You go to the self-help section. You find the books you like. You go sit in their plush, comfy chairs, read the books, and put them back when you're done. I don't know how they make money, but go to the bookstores. They got all kinds of books on things like anger management. All of it gets down to 3 very simple principles. Number 1, see it coming. We pay attention to people's faces, the words they use, the gestures they use, how they communicate. And not only that, look at how you communicate. We may not intend to. Vivian didn't mention this earlier, but harassment, especially sexual harassment, the 2 most common defenses when people get sued, they go to court, what is the reason they said they'd engaged in that harassing behavior? What do you think?
The other person also likes
That maybe number 3. Number 1, I didn't mean it. He took it wrong, or she took it wrong. Number 2, I was just kidding. And what do you think the court says to both of those? Pay up. You're going to lose. How do I look? What's my face? I was at Lowe's. I know it's the only time I've ever been there. I was with, at the time, my wife. She and I were still married, and we're checking out, and the woman behind the cash register says, is everything okay? And my wife said, yeah, it's fine. We got everything we wanted. And she said, are you sure? And my wife goes, well, why? She says, because your husband looks really mad. I said, I'm not mad. I'm thinking. Big thoughts, deep thoughts. And I realized whether I intended to or not, at least for her, I was coming across as angry. My bet is if she interprets me as being angry, she's going to respond in a defensive manner, whether I intended it or not. So I notice other people's face. I listen to other people's language. I look at their body posture, and doggone it, I better expect the same thing from me. Because you didn't mean it doesn't count. How do you come across? Does your intent match your impact? That is a huge issue. See it coming. Years ago, my older boy and I were playing basketball in the front yard. He says I fouled him. I just barely bumped him. He fell down, and they split his eye open. Had to get stitches. It's no big deal. Anybody here? Everybody here has stitches in their eyes, right? You got to get out more. I mean, come on. So I take him to the local emergency room. That's what our insurance wanted us to do. So I go there, and there's this fella. We walk in, and we're going over the little desk there to meet the triage nurse, and she's not there. We go to the desk, and this fella comes up, looking at him. Oh, man, look at his eye. Oh, he's going to need stitches. That's terrible. And you shouldn't be here. This place is terrible. I've been here 3 hours. Look at these people. This guy, you know he's not sick. He's just here watching TV. And I can't believe these people over in this guy. You know he doesn't have insurance. None of these people. You know these people. And I'm a citizen, and, God, don't bring me into this world, please. And I said, I appreciate this, sir, but I just need to talk to the nurse. So she comes out, thank God, but then he interrupts, and he starts complaining. When are you going to see me? I mean, he's obviously angry, irate, upset. He's pacing. Everybody can tell. Now, the good news is he went in the back before we did. But I know where he is. Y'all been in emergency rooms, right? A lot of cots and curtains. And I know he's on the next cot over because I can see his shoes. They're right there. So I'm sitting with my son, and I try to respect people's privacy. When the doctor came in to see this fella, I happened to hear. And the doctor said, so what can I do for you? And the guy laid into the doctor. You could have been here 3 hours ago. I've been sitting out here. Got this guy watching TV in the lobby, and these people don't pay their taxes on it. Same old stuff. And the doctor says, look, I don't need this from you. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. But I don't want to hear this stuff. The guy punched the doctor in the mouth. Laid him out. He's right there. I can see him now. And I'm going, dang. And if you've ever been in a hospital and you ever hear code gray, that's security. And you know there's a police officer in there somewhere. He's hanging out with the nurses. And sure enough, they came. They arrested the fella. And I got no sympathy for him. He needed to go to jail. He was wrong. But you know that doctor? I got no sympathy for him. Why would you be so disrespectful of someone who's clearly agitated, clearly upset, obviously overwhelmed? Why didn't the nurse warn you? Don't be flippant, dismissive, disrespectful to anybody, especially someone who's telling you they can't take it right now. And what we have to do is look at the totality. It's something you brought up earlier. It's not just the fellow who did the punching who owns this, but it's the fellow who created it that owns it as well. How do we look at the totality? See it coming. We can see it. We're never surprised. Number 2, calm yourself. And number 3, calm the other. So let's say, or Kenny, you're never going to sit up front again. So let's say Kenny and I get into it. We're face to face. We're nose to nose. We're calling each other names. We're posturing, doing all that kind of stuff. Which one of us should be most responsible for ensuring that I conduct myself appropriately? Me. I buy that. It's my responsibility. Which one of us should be most responsible for ensuring he conducts himself appropriately? Me. Why me? Because I can only control me and what I do. And I know 2 very important things that you know. If I spiral out of control and I say or do something grossly inappropriate, I may lose my position with the council. I may, if I do something really stupid, lose my freedom. Folks, I'm going home tonight. I got 3 kids to see grow up. Anybody have grandkids? How many you got? 2? Ma'am? 2? How many you got? 4? I don't have any. When my 15-year-old son had his girlfriend over for dinner a while back, and I was saying, I really would like some grandchildren. And I got a call from her father the next day saying, I didn't mean now, but I did mean it, but not now. Folks, I'm going home tonight. I got grandkids not born yet that I want to see grow old. If I lose control, I lose the opportunity to spend that time with my grandkids. Number 2, I know as well as you do that if Kenny loses control, and if he starts to spiral out of control, we all know best defense is what? A good offense. And it's like police officers. It's one of the interesting things in training at the academy. They're trained to respond with force equal to that which is presented against them. That's the craziest thing I ever heard. Who wants a tie? Respond equal and a little bit extra if you don't mind. If he spirals out of control, I may very likely join in. It is a very natural response. I may engage in behavior which may limit my freedom, which might limit my opportunity to continue my profession. It may affect my ability to go home tonight. It's in my best interest. And one of the things we have to do is go back and realize, especially if you're a member of the council, I expect more from you than the folks walking in. I expect more from each of you than the person sitting next to you. All right, that's one of those weird puzzles. You figure it out. But I really do. I expect each one of us to take the responsibility where we can. So, very easily said again, we can get a whole book in 3 paragraphs. What is the single most important thing you can do to help yourself calm down when you're starting to feel yourself anger up? Back off, calm down, take a time out, catch your breath. Some people pray, meditate, walk away, put some air between you, go shopping. I don't care what you do. But all of it is predicated on catching your breath, slowing things down. Some of you may remember, breathe deep amidst the gathering gloom as light fades. Moody Blues, 1967. I went to a concert last night. I saw Pat Benatar. And I realized, but her first album came out in 1979. In any case, breathe deep. Slow things down. The nice thing is some people do what we call mirror. you catch your breath, they may do the same thing. Very few things give you the immediate return on the investment that slowing the situation down will get you. Slow down. If I want to help somebody else calm down, what's the single most important thing I can do to help somebody else? I'm sorry? Calm ourselves? What do you think, though? What's in the more proactive? What can I do? I'm sorry? All right, so don't blame him. Tell him it's not his fault. Try to ease him. But I heard somebody say it earlier. The single most important thing I can do when somebody else is angry, be quiet and listen. Slow me down and listen to them. Symbolically, you know what it does? Is it says to the other person, I'm going to put my stuff down and listen to you. That's a very respectful course of action. Now, some folks will go on and on and on and on, and I get it. But at some fundamental level, my goal is not to be the biggest and the baddest. My goal is not to wrestle you. My goal is to get through this safely. Slow things down, catch your breath. Go ahead, sir.
Since we're in a training
Mode, yes.
and you have individuals who can go on for days, what would be a nice approach to limit
Great. The question is, if we are respectful, we're catching our breath, we're slowing the process down, we're listening, what do we do when somebody is going on and you're thinking, you know what, I got to eat tonight? But in the real world, you're thinking, we've heard this before. You're not bringing anything new, and you know what, we don't have time. Well, I'm going to give you a couple little tips as we go along, but okay. First, always listen attentively, non-defensively. Show that you're trying to understand their point of view. My goal is to understand. You all have all read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of them, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Know what it is that's driving them. Then you can figure out how to meet their need. Remain calm and respectful, emotionally neutral. And as you slow things down, you try to start looking for questions that might get them to start thinking logically, as well as to start putting in on it. I appreciate what you're bringing up. What would you like me to do right now? Sometimes they'll say, nothing, just shut up and listen. Okay, I can do that. But I want to let you know, I've only got 8 more minutes. So I want to be respectful. So how about if we go to 8 more, and maybe we can bring it up again tomorrow? So you start asking them questions. You start setting limits in a respectful way. I think people are willing to be told. If you're saying, look, you're blowing us out of proportion, and if you blow them off, they're going to react angrily. If you start to set limits, saying, look, I appreciate this. I respect what you're saying. I'd like to hear more. I honestly can't do it more than this. How can we get done the best use of this time? You start to engage them in the problem solving, not just the complaining. We had a gentleman earlier, unfortunately, I think he had to leave, say, it's that proactive step. It's where you, as council members, really are looking at getting involved. And I can't remember the exact words he used, and I wish I could because I liked what he said. It's that whole process, though, of engaging early, being proactive, and involving that person in the decision, how we're going to resolve this conversation. I don't know how we're going to fix what you're bringing up. We need to figure out how we're going to resolve this conversation right now. And that's part of where we go. And we look at this whole notion of power struggle, big and bad. You can get a restraining order. Doesn't mean you should. I don't know. You can call the police. I don't know. Does it serve you well? Many years ago, I was the aquatics director for the city of Linwood. Anybody ever go swimming at the Linwood Natatorium? 50 meters. How long ago? 88. Okay, I left there in 1979. But it's a 50-meter indoor pool. Who are you looking for, sir? Everybody's looking for you, Kenny. All right. Anyway, so back in the 70s, I started off as a lifeguard. I worked my way up. I got promoted to the aquatics director. Some of you may remember our community is a tough decade, the 70s. I frankly got even worse in the 80s. But the gangs were just cutting up the territory. The pool in Compton had been shut down for an extended period of time, so all the kids from Compton came to Linwood Pool, to my pool. We had a lot of kids come down Imperial Highway from Nickerson, Jordan Downs mostly, using my pool. So we had a lot of conflict and a lot of issues. So one day I went out in Bullis Park out behind the pool, and I found the biggest, meanest looking guy I could. He's only about 5'11", big buff guy, and I offered him a job as a lifeguard, and he said, I can't swim. I said, I don't want you to swim. I hired a bouncer. Just be there. Now, did I have more fights or less fights after I hired this fella? Interesting. We actually had more. Because as big and bad as he is, there's badder out there. Actually, I learned something way off subject. But this one fella, and I feel bad because he's a nice enough guy to me, but I think in the outside world he wasn't a nice guy. I don't think he's still alive. He was a bad guy, but he's huge. Just got out of prison. One day he comes up to me and says, "How many fingers you got?" I think it's one of those trick questions, right? With 8 fingers and 2 thumbs? And he says, "No, fingers." And so he flexes, and he can put 8 fingers under his chest. Boom, that's how far out he stuck. He was huge. He's a monster, one of the monsters. You remember them. And you think he was afraid of my balancer? He wanted to take him on and see what he had. And what I found is we get somebody out there walking around big and bad, it creates an air of tension. It creates a lot of discomfort. Not only that, it made my lifeguards lazy. See, they could sit up in the towers, yell at people, and stick the bouncer after them. So the next year, I still hired the fellow back. I was afraid of him. But I put him in the office counting quarters. It was 25 cents for kids, 35 for adults. We had a lot of quarters. He sat in the office and made sure no one ran in the lobby. But out on the deck, I had my lifeguards put their megaphones down, get out of the towers, talk to people. It was respectful. And I found we still have fights. We still have conflict. There are issues in your world and mine that aren't easily resolved. I get it. But I found that overall, when we changed the tone and tenor of how we did business, it reduced the overall conflict we saw in our community. That was a big deal to me back in 1978, 79. Sir?
Many neighborhood councils have the opportunity, it may even be in their bylaws, for someone to have the title of sergeant at arms.
Sure.
In other words, someone to help keep order at a meeting. What general thoughts do you have about whether that position should be filled? Given what you just said, if someone is speaking from the position of as being a sergeant at arms, could that provoke or engender
Great.
more hostility?
See, now, first of all, I like as many titles as you can create, the more board members you get, and usually that's a good thing. Sergeant of Arms, it's not the title that's important to me, it's the person filling the position. We work with police departments a lot. Dr. Phelps and I do a lot of training. And it's that very interesting, line that a police officer has to walk. How do you establish command presence? But if you overuse your force, then you can take a bad situation and make it much worse. We have a couple officers we work with LAPD that we like. We've got a couple officers of public safety here for the city. Y'all know OPS. You see them. And we've got a couple that we really like. And we've got a couple that are less effective, and we're working on that. I want the sergeant of arms who is able to communicate to folks, who goes out and says, "Hey, folks, let me just tell you all right now, here's how we're going to run the meeting. If there's any issue, I'm going to come up to you and talk to you about it." The big, blustery, bad fella, I'm not real crazy about. I like having a sergeant of arms. I don't want the president to have to deal with everything. It's nice when somebody else can come and say, "Hang on, folks. I'm not the president. I'm not you. I just want this meeting to go appropriately. Here's how we're going to do it." I like it. So, frankly, for me, if you're asking me, fill the position. But it's who you fill it with that's more important to me than anything else. I'm in an association. My sergeant at arms is probably the easiest going guy around. He's also sergeant in Orange County PD, and if he has to be, he can be a bad dude. But I chose him because he communicates very well. He's reasonable, and he just talks to people. But the interesting thing is, when you're talking to him, though, he can be real serious if he has to. But why pull that out of your hat? So, to me, it's about respect. It's how you treat folks. It's how you do that piece. Now, the other piece, and I want to get into quickly, is this notion of conflict. Well, it's related to anger. Conflict is just when two people have different needs, expectations, goals at a given time, which is most of us in this room. When it's a given when I look at neighborhood council. Y'all have competing desires for very limited resources. Time, money. I heard some questions, too, of the gang folks this morning. Y'all have huge issues, and sometimes we can only solve little slivers. And so I expect there to be a lot of conflict in your meetings. I expect there to be a lot of conflict within your constituents. It just makes sense to me. I expect it. It's not the conflict that counts. It's what we do with it. And years ago, we have to go back and look at how we deal with conflict as individuals. I look at all of y'all as leaders. A lot of us do what we've been taught to do. My mother is from South America. She's from Chile. And as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, she's hot-blooded. And in that case, he was right. My mother, you know what she's thinking, because it goes from back here, out here, and there's quick. So when she's upset, My dad, he has kind of Hungarian, Irish grandparents. I don't know what that has to do with anything other than he don't talk. And he was taught early on, he was born and raised over here in East L.A., that kids not only are not to be heard, they're not to be seen. So he grew up shutting up. My father, when he got quiet as bad. Someone's going to get in trouble. So I grew up with these two things. One, just let it all out, and that wasn't always real effective. Or number two, hold it in. And unfortunately, I'm more like my dad in many ways. I'd hold it in until what? And then I'd explode. And when my dad did that, I couldn't figure out why he's not just mad at me for what I did here, but he brings up 6 weeks worth of stuff. It wasn't effective. It's a great challenge for us to go back and say, how do we usually deal with conflict, and does it serve us well? Just because it's what we're comfortable with doesn't mean it's our best tool. So I've been working for decades and decades trying to merge my mother and father. Be upfront with stuff. Deal with things now. Don't hold it in. But for goodness sake, be calm about it. Be thoughtful about it. It's hard, but it can be done. Now, years ago, we were asked for a police department in Orange County to put together training. They had a lot of issues with their inter-officer conflict, and we came up with a very simple model that we really applied it in many other areas, and we called the calm approach to conflict resolution. Very clever, isn't it? Connect, assess, listen, and mediate. And the reason we think this is different from a lot of them, because most of the conflict resolution programs we see really start at the end, where you put the problem on the table, you identify solutions, you start to implement them, you evaluate their success, and they don't work. For us, the most important steps are the first two. You got to connect with the other person. It's that, what do we have in common? We want this neighborhood council to be successful. We want our community to be safer, cleaner, healthier. I love the questions about jobs and stuff. I mean, some of the things y'all are dealing with day in and day out are wonderful challenges. I don't know the solution, but thank God people like you are working on them. How do we connect with the other people in the room? How do we figure out what it is we have in common? Then we can start to assess the differences that are creating the conflict. And one of the more important things is to ask first, what do you need from me? What is you like me to do? Like I kind of mentioned earlier, what do you see me as being able to do for this? I'm not sure if I can, but let me know. I might. And you seek first to understand the other person, then to understand, then to be understood. Ask what you can do. And then you make sure a person feels heard. How many times have you talked to kids? Whether in gangs or not, and I don't know what the definition is either. Somebody brought it up earlier. I don't know. But I guess you brought it up earlier. It's a great question. We're dealing with kids. They tell you, no one listens to me. You're not hearing me. And sometimes it is more a matter of, no, I am hearing you, I really am listening, but I don't agree with you. And that's okay, too. But how many times do folks say, I don't feel heard? And sometimes people in our meetings just want to be heard. So we say, you know what? I don't think you're really asking me a question. I think you're making a statement. Just say what's on your mind. Let me know what you're thinking. Make sure somebody is heard. And you say, let me make sure I got this. Let me make sure you feel heard. I can't tell you as a counselor how many times folks will say, I feel better. And I'm thinking, I didn't do anything. But finally somebody listened. And sometimes that has an opportunity. After you do that, then we do all that problem-solving stuff. It's all about the people. It's about the relationships. Remember, together we can solve a lot of stuff. By ourselves, we can't fix anything. And the real issue is binding together. I played a lot of sports. I played in college, and I've coached youth sports. I pick teams based on how well the kids get along. I can make a good athlete, but it's hard to unmake somebody who is disruptive, who is a bad influence, what they call the poisonous in the locker room. But y'all know this stuff. We see it. We get it. Are we poisonous or are we healthy in our meetings? Are we poisonous or healthy in our committees? Are we poisonous or healthy in our community? Forget about your intent. What's your actual impact, and what do you bring to the table? So what's the easiest thing for a leader to do when two or more people are angry and conflict with each other? Nothing. Let it go. For God's sake, I got enough other stuff to deal with. I don't want to have to worry about this. It's not effective. It hurts us. So part of what I'm really looking at is y'all as leaders, looking at the characteristics of an effective leader. And a leader isn't just the one who can make decisions on allocating funds. It's not just the person who can follow Roger's rules of orders. It's the person who can manage the relationships. And it takes courage. It takes guts to be able to go into a situation and not know what the outcome's going to be. To go in and know that you don't know what's going to happen. And that's a hard position. It's hard to be objective and non-judgmental. I'm a homer. I love local sports. I'm a USC graduate. I'm a UCLA graduate. I can't go wrong. I love soccer, whether it's Chivas or Galaxy. But if you ask me if my team did well, I can be honest. I can be objective. I coach kids. I can tell kids who I love with all my heart, you need to get better. You're not going to get any more playing time. Here's the areas you need to grow. We can be passionate about our things, but still be honest, objective. We don't place blame. We'll figure out who screwed up later. I have an aunt who's the most successful business person I know, and there's a lot of folks richer than her, but she has her own restaurant, and most restaurants fail in a year, and she's been going now since '84. A long time. She's doing really well. And I remember early on watching her, and something would go wrong. She said, let's fix it. She didn't spend a lot of time figuring out who messed up, who do I fire. She said, let's fix it. Now, later on, she made other hard decisions, but she was always in, okay, what went wrong? Let's fix it. And that's a huge mindset, and it's a different mindset than where we're getting into in many ways. We listen with empathy. If this other person has good intent, however misguided their presentation is, how do I respect that? How do I understand? How do I show compassion? How do I show care about what's important to them? And again, focusing on behavior, it's about issues, not individuals. It's problems, not people. Again, be comfortable with disagreement. I don't mind folks getting mad. I think that's my family. I say, okay, Pat, you go fix it. Because I don't mind folks getting angry. I mind us staying that way. I mind us not fixing the problem. And we need to be comfortable with disagreement. It's okay. There's nothing personal here. Be patient, flexible, and really our goal is to resolve and move the organization forward. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about our communities. It's about our neighborhoods. So who benefits when workplace conflict is directly and constructively dealt with and handled? Everyone. It really is. And we know this. It's one of those things that you all spend your days on. How do we make this better? And sometimes, you know what? If I mess up, I'll fess up. And sometimes I don't think I messed up. I can let it go somebody else's way. I look to y'all as leaders of your neighborhood councils. I look to you as leaders in your community. Y'all wouldn't be here. There's a lot of things to do on a Saturday morning and come in here for 4 hours. And the commitment, then we want to give you as many resources to make it effective. So again, overall, we look at your toolbox, the ability to understand your style, your impact on others, how you come across, whether intended or not, will be a valuable tool in your overall effectiveness. Your ability to communicate calmly, assertively, clearly, and non-defensively, and those are not always easy to have, will be essential in your success. And we also think that if you deal with things early, then people like me never get called in. When I look at the homicides, the assaults, of the things that I spend my days on, it's usually the result of years and years and sometimes decades of unresolved anger, that festering resentment, that sense of humiliation. What does every workplace shooter and every school shooter have in common? Every workplace shooter and every school shooter, what do they all have in common? Frustration, anger, low self-esteem, feel disrespect. They were bullied. They were bullied. They were bullied. Now, we're bullies sometimes, inadvertently. If our way is the right way, the only way, look at it. Do you come across as a bully? Do you come across as someone who's willing to listen? I will tell you, I don't mind making the hard decision. I want the ball in my hands for the last shot because I have a lot of confidence. I want to do right. But you know what? Sometimes I give it to this other fellow over here because right now he's going to do better than I will. But don't bully anybody. We don't get in their face. We're not bigger than better. It's not how we do business. And again, where we can give you tools in your council, we're better served. The fewer times you need to call Vivian or myself or the threat management unit for LIT, we're all better served. Deal with things early. Address it locally. It has the opportunity to get solved more likely. And truth be told, some things are bigger than you and me. Make the call. Talk to us. I spend most of my day sitting down and metaphorically scratching my head with folks saying, well, I'm not really sure what you got. Let's really take a look at it. And I'm not sure where we're going to go with it, but let's see what we got, and then we'll figure it out. We can figure it out if you get the right folks at the table early on in the process. So I appreciate the work you do. My kids live in your communities. I live in your communities. We go to your parks. We do these things together. I want to make sure that Dunn is successful. This is an important thing y'all are doing for our communities, and we hope to help you and be successful together. So thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,